Thank you, Shirley. Very good evening, morning, afternoon, friends, people who are joining in into this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us once again if you are returning, and welcome to our BrainFit if you are new to us for the very first time. So this evening, we'll be talking about a topic that is very close to my heart. So some of you might know that I am a physical therapist by training, and we will be talking about movement, especially movement in relation to attention and learning. Now, Shirley has done a quick introduction. I'll just recap a few things in case you're just tuning in. So I'm supported by a group of very capable panelists. So do feel free to put any questions on the Q&A panel, and our panelists will help me to answer some of the questions because we are unlikely to have time to go through all the questions. If you want to know more about them, they are available on our website. And we have the Thai language interpretation that's available, and Woody is helping us with that. So please select that channel if it helps you. And again, a quick introduction. My name is Cheryl. I am a physical therapist. I'm also the founder of an entity called BrainFit, which is based out in Singapore. I have had a long journey in my career with brain training now, and so I've also lectured on the topic. I do a lot of presentations. And I am also an author and a mother to two girls. So very firsthand kind of experience in nurturing and building my own brains. And I use movement a lot too. So we want to talk about that. BrainFit was established in Singapore in the year 2001. We specialize in running cognitive training programs in our learning centers in the countries that you can see on the screen, as well as partner schools that we work with. Here you can see some of the centers in Singapore, Indonesia, China. So we have enrichment programs catering to babies as young as 9 months to adults and even seniors. And also we run a preschool in some of our outfits. We've won awards and we are associated with some great partners who are interested in, the field of neuroscience and building the brains. So we appreciate all of them as well, for expanding our knowledge and also for the recognition from the awards. Yeah, let's get into the topic proper. I was just commenting to my panelists how strange I think the topic is in a sense because we are talking about movement and because this is done over the webinar, so it's not actually able to get my audience to stand up and move. So it will be kind of sedentary. Of course, I'll be showing you, some of these movements, but I will much prefer that all of us are together face to face in person, so that we can be up off our seat and experimenting some of these. Unfortunately, we can't. So we'll just do the best that we can. So this evening, we are talking about movement and how we can harness the potential, right, from physical exercises, physical activities to actually enhance the brain. I actually have a poll to get us going. I just think it's nice to see, how everybody is. And so if you're on Zoom, do join us on the poll. I just have two simple questions, and it's a kind of a true and false, or fact and myth, or myth, yeah? So the first question is that our body senses can affect our learning, right? So is that a fact or a myth? And just your true response, you might be in a webinar like today, but you think, you think it's just a sketchy topic, perhaps, yeah. And the second question is physical exercises can literally increase our intelligence. Whether that's kind of more mythical sounding, or do you think, yeah, that should be quite factual? Let's launch the poll. Can you see that on your screen? I hope you're able to see that. Let's wait a couple of minutes for some participation. So don't worry about right and wrong. Yeah, just see what you think. Are we all done? Okay, we have got about 80%. Okay, let's end the poll and look at the results and share that. Share the results. Okay, 100% think is a fact, right? So that's good, all right? So we'll look a little bit into that. And then we have about close to 10% who thinks it's a myth for the second question, that physical exercises can literally increase our intelligence. So let's take a look at that as well, because it does sound a bit far-fetched, right? But, let's examine some of the research. Let's get on to the first point. So the first point, most people think that, yes, it is important. Now and it is in fact true, but let's look at how this system actually affects all of us. So when we talk about the sensory motor brain, we typically talk about two primary areas. So the first is kind of like sitting at the top of the brain. So you can see here the brain that slices kind of apart, on your left side of your screen. So that big chunk, at the top. And then you have the little old brain at the bottom as well, the cerebellum, right? So those are kind of classically, the movement control, the areas of the brain that kind of controls our movement. Here's another slide, but where you can see that the brain is even, it's really quite highly specialized in that there are strips of cells or networks, yeah? And they have jobs that specializing in even, just sensing a particular area of the body, right? So you have an area of the brain that's sensitive to your fingers, for example, or your toes, yeah? And of course, the hands, has a large amount of sensory areas, your fingers and thumbs, yeah? But then you also have the output area, all right? So we always talk about senses that's feeding in to the system. So that typically comes in from your skin, from your muscles, from your joints, right? From your balance sensors in the inner ears. We'll talk a little bit about that one as well. And they get processed. So they tell you, they give you information, right? Like temperature, if you touch something hot, it quickly, sends that information into the brain, and then it talks to the output. The output would be the muscular system. Then you quickly you quickly draw your hand away. So that's the sensory motor connection. So the two areas work intimately with each other to help us, keep us safe, help us to navigate through our everyday environments. So you can see it's another depiction. So there are different terms you can see here: visual, auditory, tactile. So those would be the senses that we are familiar with. So our senses, I kind of like, highlighted it in red. So we're familiar with three of those, right? And of course, we have taste and smell that I didn't put up here. So that makes our 5 core senses. But I want to introduce 2 senses that are lesser known, but very important for learning, all right? Vestibular sense and our proprioception sense. Now, the others that are not highlighted, so you have your muscles, joints, and tendons. And so that's your actual physical muscular skeletal system, yeah? Then you have your ability to coordinate. So eye-hand coordination, that's the talking between sensory and motor. Planning as well, right? Executing a movement in sequence. And of course, you need feedback. You need to be able to feel, to sequence and plan. And all this affects behavior, attention, and you might have kids or have students who tend to fidget or be restless, or kind of have a lot of movement activity, and you kind of think of the body system as the culprit. It's moving too much and therefore affecting learning. So here you can see all the different ideas, all right, or systems that we have that's a kind of associated with the sensory motor system. So I want to talk about 3 systems a little bit, yeah, and because it's probably, the terms are maybe a little bit newer, and I want to talk about them because they are so important for the topic this today, where we are talking about the relationship specifically, not just movement on its own, but how does it really affect cognitive and intellectual processing. Yeah. Now, let's look at the vestibular system. So this is a sense, yeah. It's a sense organ, just like smell. Okay, we talk about smell, but we don't talk about the vestibular system. So it's very important. It sits in the inner ears, right? We call that our balance or spatial sense. Now, it's got very important jobs, in helping to give us maintain our head stability, give us good postural tone, right? So some people tend to be a little bit more floppy. They are the leaners. Maybe when they're on their desk, they take a lot more effort to prop up. So we might call that low tone sometimes. And the vestibular system has got responsibility for maintaining that tone because it senses where you are. It wants to keep you upright. All right. So it tells them, after sensing where you are, it tells the muscles to keep you, the trunk, the head muscles to help you to keep upright. So it needs to be, the sensing feeds into that muscular system straight away. It helps you maintain balance, of course, because it's sensing motion. All right. So it quickly talks to the skeletal system and say, hey, you got to stretch out your right leg, your right foot to keep balance, right? If you're on a moving platform, for example. It has got direct nerve connections to the muscles that control your eyes. Yeah. So that's why when you read in the car, for example, right, you can get car sick. Yeah. And because that's your motion sensor that's going on a bit of overdrive. And it gives you a sense of your body in space because of all these incoming information. So it affects learning primarily, the most direct, and of course you can see that all this affects, learning in the sense that if you are not able to keep a good posture, right, your muscles going to work harder, and you're going to lose a mental capacity for paying attention, right? So a child that takes more effort, mental effort, just to sit up tall, right, it's going to have less bandwidth for attention span. And we talk about efficiency, motor efficiency in a little bit. So it keeps your eyes stable. Of course, our eyes need to be stable when we're reading, for example, when we're copying from the board, right? It's got to be accurate. We've got to direct our eyes to a position and then come back. And so if it's not moving smoothly, and it is really not an uncommon problem, right? Where we have children who are manifesting carelessness behaviors, and we're actually seeing that their eyes are not able to move very fluently left to right, quickly or accurately. And sometimes with the vestibular system could be one of the systems that we want to look at if it's doing, contributing to any of that behaviors. And the other big connection is space, right? Math as a subject is a spatial subject, right? So your understanding of space comes first from your internal sense, right? It gives you a sense of where you are in relation to something. You are near, you're far, right? So you have that sense, you're going fast, all right? Motion, yeah? And math is a spatial subject. We'll talk about math in one of our webinars, for sure we will do that. And you will hear that, the research has certainly shown us that math is very much a spatial understanding, and in the brain as well. It requires us to process spatial information, and that's how this system already can affect, learning. Now, the second system I want to talk about is proprioception. It might sound foreign to you as well, but it's another sense, just like smell, taste, all right? It just has a bigger term, more complex sounding. But proprioception refers to the automatic awareness of the positions of our arms and legs. That means if you close your eyes, right? So now I know that, okay, I've put my hand on top of my head. So right now, it's, my hand is just beside my ear, right? How do I know that? My eyes are shut. I know that because my skin, my muscles, it tells me where it is, right? And again, just like the vestibular system, we often assume that these senses are just working 100%, right? But we know that they're not. It's just like the visual and auditory system. We know that you might visualize something, somebody else might visualize the same thing, but at the brain level, it's interpreted differently, which is why some children will reverse a 6 as a 9, a B as a D, all right? The letter is actually the same, but your brain tells you something different than another brain, It's the same as the auditory system. You might hear Tuesday, somebody's going to hear Thursday, right? We all do not have 100% accurate processing. So that's where the brain fitness idea come in, where some brains are fitter, it's very sharp, very accurate, very precise, and other brains are unfortunately not as sharp. The mental effort that it takes to process the information is more laborious, so we may lose accuracy. And in the same way, we might not have the most accurate sense from the ears with regards to space or where our limbs are. All right. I'm going to show you a video, if because it sounds weird. And it is really hard for all of us who have an intact, or who may have an intact or totally fit brain in these areas to appreciate how it feels like in a body that doesn't fully feel itself. It's strange, all right? You might think, like, how can that be possible? You cannot feel? Yes, right? It may not be feeling, you may be able to feel, but not in the accuracy that is required for everyday living and school success. So here's a video of me once upon a time. And I was doing an assessment on some 9-year-old children in a school in Singapore. And we were looking at proprioception. So the ability to, of a child to sense the limbs. So you will see in the video that I would, place the arm of the child in a certain position, and then the child will have to follow, right? But this is with the eyes closed. So the child's not allowed to see. I simply position the arm in a position, and then I see if he can follow exactly the same position with the other arm, all right? And we know that by 6 years old, so 6 years old is quite a, significant brain milestone. But by then and beyond that, we should expect a child to be able to accurately, copy a limb position. So let's have a look at the video. And I am going to share the sound, but maybe not this clip. Yeah, okay, let's see. So here you can see, right, I'm simply positioning the arm in the limb in a position. So his eyes are shut, right? And I'm asking him to follow with the other hand. Just copy, yeah? Whatever the other hand feels like the position it's in. Can you see that? Can you see the wrist? So I positioned the wrist kind of like flex upwards, and the child had it pointed downwards, right? So you might think, like, why would he do that? And of course, his eyes are closed; he cannot see it. So this is a child who has a weakness, yeah, in sensing where the limbs are, right? And it makes everyday tasks hard, and also school extremely hard, right? Because if you're not able to sense your limbs, how do you sense a pencil really accurately in your hand, right? How much are you going to grip? Some kids grip very hard, right? And writing becomes absolutely laborious and unenjoyable, Some kids grip really too soft. They're not aware of that. And some kids, of course, might be okay with grip, but they struggle with having, neat handwriting or spacing out correctly and all that. Yeah, so it starts to have a direct impact on what's happening in the classroom and in school. So let's go on a little bit more. So at this point, what I did was I actually told him, "Are you sure?" So then the boy opened his eyes, and when he could see his body, that was when he then corrected, right? It's only with his sight that he was able to know where the limbs actually were. Oops. Right. So anyway, I was just going to go off that, but I just wanted to show you, as we go on, the head, how much drooping it has come down, right? And again, that's the vestibular system. Remember, we talk about it holding us up, giving us that tone, right? So that's another sign, right? When a child without vision, where's my body? Can I hold it up right? Yeah, so that's hard. And I can tell you that in the school that we were working with, when we had shown this video, right, as part of the debrief, right, so the administrators in the school were very surprised. So they were saying like, wow, it was quite shocking to them that this child had sensory motor weaknesses because he was actually an extremely active boy. So he would be running around a lot in school. So everybody knows him, so they think of him as hyperactive. And the adults actually thought that it was because he could move very well, that he was moving a lot. But no, in his case, he's moving a lot, probably as a compensation mechanism to feed more of these sensations into the body, because the body is clearly not able to pick up, accurate sensory information very well. And yes, and so the other problem that it could create, might be overactivity. Child is moving, fidgeting a lot, disrupting their own attention span and learning, all right, because of this inability to be anchored and still. Yeah. And so here, so that would be the sensory part. Now, I want to talk quickly about motor planning. So with all these senses that come in, then we need to execute movement, right? So in PE, physical education classes, when you have to execute, a certain movement if it's new. So you would be planning, right? Sequentially. The first step, I will, move my, bring my arm to the right, maybe 90 degrees. Then I'm going to flex my elbow, So depending on what you're trying to do, right, you have to be able to feel your body, then think of a sequence of movement and then execute that. So we call that motor plan, right? It needs the senses to be working well. So here you can see, again, the boy, we saw earlier with that some weaknesses in that sensory motor processing. And the challenges, associated with executing some very simple movement patterns. Yeah, really hard. Yeah. And these movement patterns should be easily executed by a child, a 6 or even under. Yeah, preschoolers would be able to do that. But you can see the amount of concentration. It's not that, for lack of effort, the muscles are all tense up. He's trying his best, he's focusing, but the limbs are hard to, move according to the way he wants. So this is actually his peer of the same age. And you can see, the difference in the ability to move. I'll just bring that down. The fluency that you can see here. So you can see for this girl, she does have a motor planning weakness, right? But hers is very unique, right? So you can see the first part, she did it very effortlessly. And most of us, if we do it like that, it's really very hard for our bodies, for us to appreciate how it might be hard for somebody whose senses might not be fully accurate. Yeah. And for this girl, when we cross, from the left side to the right side, we call it crossing the midline, like when a limb goes over across your body, right? So that's when the planning really starts to break down a little bit. So you can see here, the midline, the crossing part, it's quite challenging for her. Oops. So this is easy. Yeah, you can see, that being really quite difficult for her. Yeah. So it affects, all of us in different ways. But suffice to say, it's important, really important, and it helps us a lot in our everyday lives, is we have all these senses working well for us. Yeah. So here you can see when the way, we understand the body is not a separate, as separate from our intellectual processing or the brain, intelligence as we think about it, academics. Yeah. So we often are concerned about how the children are doing in school, of course, the 21st century skills, your critical thinking, creative thinking. And these are terms that we know about if you're a teacher, especially, all right, you work heavily here. right? And of course, we have now got social emotional skills, mindset, that we're trying to build in our children as well. But underneath all of that, right? So some of these we call cognitive skills, but we have a whole support system that's kind of like, an iceberg that's kind of under, you don't see that. But that's the sensory processing, the vestibular, the proprioception that I mentioned. And then you have your motor coordination and your planning, right? That helps you even plan the alphabets that you need to write. Yeah. So there's some planning involved, in writing that really supports all these functioning. But more and more, right, research is now coming out to show that the relationship is really very intimate. For example, and this relationship between motor skills and cognitive or intellectual performance manifests very early. And these are all quite recent research, yeah? So results in a study reveal a significant correlation between the emergence of sitting skills and receptive vocabulary size, right? How much the child is understanding language at 10 and 14 months of age. So that this body and mind connection, right, is a lot closer, right? So a lot of the processes, the brain processes that's needed to process be accurate in some of these sensory information, is also needed for that intellectual processing. Motor skills at 18 months were predictive of subsequent language skills at 3 years of age, right? So, while we might think that, my uncle, my dad, the father, he walked when he was 5 and he was okay, eventually he could walk, right? But now we're looking at milestones more closely, right? And we want to develop the development of milestones, yeah, rather than leaving the children alone, because milestone itself, right, is just not the checklist that we tick, but it gives us an idea how some of these processing is happening in the brain, right? Some of these planning, like planning how to sit up, for example. A child has to plan with I have to now roll to the side. I've got to now push up my body. Now I got to sit up. Now that is a planning capability. And we know that planning capability is not limited to motor planning, right? It affects your thinking planning, your academic planning as well, your problem-solving planning as well. It's a planning kind of capacity. So we're seeing more and more closely, related in some of the motor skills and cognitive or, developmental, functions in other areas that we don't use to associate with motor functioning. Finger counting. If you teach math, please allow your young children to use their fingers, because we know of some schools or centers that will discourage the children from using the fingers because it slows down your operation, your math processing, right? Now, it is true. Now, if your children or your learners do not need to use their fingers, you don't need to force it, yeah, because yes, it is another step. It is, we don't create steps for the children. But if your child is an emergent learner, is starting to grasp math, and is very naturally using the fingers, and research has shown that we do quite naturally use our limbs, in counting our fingers. And you let them be, because research has now shown that finger counting supports math learning. In fact, I have a bunch of data or research, findings here, how finger sensors affect math scores. So that's another area that we know where we can see a connection, a direct connection between the body and an academic area. Now it's a full academic subject. Right. So when 8 to 13-year-olds were given complex math problems and they scanned the children's brains when they were solving these problems, the finger area in the brain lit up, even though the students did not use their fingers. And like I mentioned, the scientists did find that the students, right, that in many cultures, right, people, naturally use their fingers to count, or also even in tribal areas. All right, so there's some suspicion that the finger areas is a very innate math center. Yeah, and we do know that babies' brains are born to process very simple math. Yeah, so there's certain mathematical regions, and it seems that the fingers is one of them. Now, the second finding, the better students' knowledge of their fingers was in the first grade, the higher they scored on number comparison and estimation in the second grade. All right. So yeah. So how interesting is that? All right. So this is just a knowledge of the fingers. All right. And in the third experiment, university students' finger perception. So they were checking the sensitivity in their fingers, and it predicted there was a correlation with their calculation scores on math. Right. So so this is a field. There's a term we call it embodied cognition, where scientists are studying really the intimate connection between the body and our learning. So yes, very much so. Our body and the senses have a direct impact to cognitive, to academic processing, intellectual processing. So here again, all right, is the concept of motor efficiency. So I mentioned earlier, right, when a child, when you are engaging in any task, the brain at that point has a finite amount of mental resource to distribute. So we call that, the brain being an energy finite organ, right? So it's got 100%. So it's got to distribute this bandwidth. All right, when we talk about mental bandwidth, have no bandwidth, it's all a bit literally like that. So when a child's sitting at the desk, X amount of mental effort need to go into maintaining balance, sequencing of tasks. We talk about the importance of planning and sequencing, right? Not just in motor execution, in organizing your time in a task, problem solving, the different steps that's involved in solving a problem. Sequencing highly related to cognitive functioning. You need to keep balance. Your shoulder needs to be steady if you're writing, right? If it's not steady, writing is going to be hard. Your posture, fixation and movement of your eyes across the words. Some people think it's automatic. Like I said, it is automatic, but not always 100% accurate or effortless for everybody. You got to ignore the feelings of clothes on your body or contact with your desk, your chair, and the floor. And of course, you have to move your hands and wrists and fingers while writing. Every one of these tasks take up mental energy or effort. So if your sensory motor system is very efficient, meaning that it does its job well, that means I can move my eyes really well across the page, smoothly and fast, and accurately, right? If it's efficient, then you have more net mental effort to concentrate on the piece of work, which is really where you want to drive most of your attention, right? So every one of these tasks compromises your attention span. So if two children have the same attention, attention span, right? I mean, if we really just look at the ability to pay attention alone, right? Or in intelligence, right? However, where they differ is their sensory motor performance. What happens is that in a classroom or at home, right, these children will have different behaviors, even though they might have the same attention span and same amount of intellectual power, right? The child with weaker sensory motor processing will fatigue earlier in terms of attention span. So their stamina would be shorter. They would get fatigued. They will lose concentration faster. And in terms of grasping concepts, certainly when your attention span wanes, that will affect the ability to learn and perform. Yeah, attention is very important for that. So through an efficiency route, that means it's okay, the system is working, but it's just not optimized, right? So I can sense my fingers, but my hand just has to work the extra hard, right? Or I can prop up myself. I'm not always leaning, but I just take that much more energy to prop up than my partner. Your partner is going to have a mental advantage where attention is concerned, where learning is concerned, right? So that's how on an everyday basis, when our kids go to the classroom, this system that many people think is unrelated to learning, all right? Or we think of, let's give them a break, all right? It's kind of a break activity. But I actually think it's a serious system. All right, it can compromise learning, all right, with the, in a significant way. It makes the kids work a lot harder, all right? Their brains need to work a lot harder if some of these sensory or motor systems are not optimized. All right. Yeah, now, so this is the first part. We'll come to the second part where we talk about physical exercises, right? And what kind of exercises should we have? Now, feel free to put questions on the Q&A chat if you have, all right? And then we'll take questions at the end because often questions come in at the end, all right? So if you start having questions, you can put that in and our panelists can help to answer some of these questions. We want to get to them as much as we can. Now, let's look at how then, or can, can physical exercises, okay, so we know that, okay, the senses affect us. Now, what can we do? Can we really change this? Can we change sensory processing? Can we have planning that's better, more successful, sequencing that's better? So the answer is yes, yes, yes. And therefore, the poll question to that, the earlier question is, yes, we can increase IQ scores, intelligence, right? Using physical exercises alone. And research has supported that. Now, the first research actually happened in the labs, right? So they had the rats, right? So they had cage A, a mouse, all right? Mice. So cage A had sedentary mice. Cage B had very active mice that were given running wheels, to exercise on. So, these mice were given the maze test, right? So the maze test, they put food in a corner, right? So the mice will run to navigate through the maze and then get to the food. And of course, the scientists would time them. So it's a time test. So the intelligence, all right, the more intelligent rodents are the one who clock shorter timing after they have gone through the maze, a few times. So they learned it, they remember it, they have spatial memory. They have spatial intelligence, so they became faster. And so the less intelligent ones, of course, couldn't learn and didn't clock as fast a time. So the question to you is that physical exercises alone, just giving cage B a running wheel, did that impact the timing that you get on the maze test? So A, yes, in which cage, my question is essentially, which cage is end up being the smartest? And from the poll, I can imagine most of you would choose cage B, all right? Because from the poll, most of you believe that, yes, we can raise intelligence, all right? And the answer is yes, physical activities build a smarter brain. So for a while, scientists were quite perplexed, right? And this was way earlier. Now we know, a lot more about the impact of physical activities, even on the human brain. So this was where the first research, where we get the inclination that, wow, physical activity has got some relation to the brain. Because at that point in time, everybody knew that exercises help the heart, right? As a muscular organ, the heart, it became fitter if you would clock in your exercises, right? It protected you from heart disease. But people didn't associate running on exercising with being more capable, mentally. So this was the very first experiments. And later on, these animals were sacrificed, right? And eventually they looked into their brain cells. So this is a brain cell. So one of the ways I ask, I encourage people to think about the brain is like a forest. Now, an intelligent brain means you have a dense forest, okay? Because in your forest, there are billions of trees. Your trees are your brain cells. There are billions of brain cells in your brain, right? So we want density in the brain. We want lots of trees, and we want each tree to have many branches because the trees need to communicate. Yeah, the brain, different parts of the cells with different specialization need to talk to each other. So you can see that here, all the branches have come out in this group of mice who had the exercise gear. So that was our very first understanding of the relationship between movement and intelligence. It got the rats, the mouse, the mice smarter, but what about humans? So now this is human research, all right? So we now know exercise, especially with an aerobic component, that means you got to be a bit, walk is good, all right? I mean, just your heart rate needs to go up, yeah? And what it does, it optimizes alertness and attention. So it improves learning on 3 levels. Number 1 is through blood flow, all right? So the brain cannot store oxygen, right? So it's dependent on the flow, the continuous flow. if you exercise, all right, you're breathing deeper, you're sending more oxygen into the brain, right? So your heart is pumping faster, is delivering more blood with oxygen to the brain. All right, so you can see all these little blood vessels, bringing more oxygen, into the brain. So your brain becomes more alert. It's got nourishment. Okay. Number two, as you've seen earlier, right, it actually spurs the development of new nerve cells, not just the nerve cells, the trees, as well as creating branches, right, causing the nerves to branch out, right, or the dendrites, to sprout. So that's neurogenesis. And furthermore, it also gets the cells talking. Remember, we want the trees, all right, to the branches to talk to one another. And they do that via chemicals. Yeah, they don't actually physically touch, but they communicate through chemicals. So that's synaptogenesis, which is the creation of synapses. Yeah, it spurs connectivity. All right, and growth of new brain cells and connectivity is great. That is the learning process. When you learn, you make a new connection. When you remember, you have formed a new connection. When you forget, it's because you've lost a certain connection. All right. Our capabilities, our memories, our knowledge, our learning, our problem-solving skills at the biological level is described by this connectivity. All right. So that's driving that intelligence, the connectivity. And exercises was facilitating, was making the chemical conditions, right, ripe for these growth and connection to be taking place. In fact, they've discovered a chemical from the animal studies, right, a certain chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Is a big term, but it's very important. This is the chemical that is if you have it, right, it literally fertilizes your brain and grows, the brain cell. So it grows density. So BDNF is a great thing, and only release through exercises. So that's how we see the impact. Now, does it really happen in adults, children, people, humans? Yes, right, in all ages. And this is a university study of students in a university, right, when they were taking a test. So this was when they had their brain scan, when they were taking a test. So this was a group of uni students who were sitting quietly before the test. And this was a group who had gone for a walk, right, who had exercised, before they took the test. And you can see the brain activity was a lot more healthy. Yeah, a lot more brain activity going to the brain. And that's what we want. Yeah. And yes, so do you do exercises before a test? Not a bad idea, right? But I often encourage parents or teachers. So the brain bricks that we have, that we talk about, getting them out of the seat, even more so now if you are in an online learning mode, which we are here in Singapore. All right, the opportunities to get out, move. Yeah, it's so important. Because it drives that flow into the brain. And not only that, with home-based learning, it's a lot more sedentary, right? We spend a lot more hours on our seat, whereas ordinarily in school, you would at least be walking to the canteen or the field and back, and we're losing all of that. All right, now recommended exercises, let's talk about that. Aerobic exercises, so do get an aerobic component, right? Because when you have your heart rate elevated, your BDNF, it's kind of like release, and it can give you a mental boost. Now, 10 minutes of exercise, brisk walk, jumping jacks, right? Just on the spot can give the brain an immediate mental boost. So this is what research has shown. Yeah, so the brain breaks do have an effect, and pretty immediate effect, right? So if you want more attention, teachers, with your home-based learning classes, right, give a lot of brain breaks. Otherwise, how much, on a regular basis? Highly recommended to follow, the recommendations for heart health. And what is that? That is generally about 150 minutes per week, or about 30 minutes a day. Okay, so here you can see on an everyday basis, I don't know whether you know the physical exercise pyramid, but it's quite popular now. So the pyramid tells you every day you are recommended to clock your 10,000 steps, all this recommendation, all pulling in, right? So you're recommended to do your 10,000 steps a day. So, walk up and down the stairs and, walk rather than drive if you can. Then the 150 minutes per week is more kind of, you need to elevate your heart rate a little bit more moderate activity, running, jogging, bike, swimming, etc. And then of course, twice to 2 times, then you do your strength, or your strength training, your stretches, and keep sedentary, kind of stuck to the chair kind of behaviors to the minimal that you can. And of course, we know that under 2 hours is impossible. All right. But this is the general heart health recommendation. We will follow that for brain health. Yeah. And but we do know that even short bursts has an impact on the brain. So what more, with an hour of exercise, or half an hour of exercise. So you're protecting your heart, but you're giving great benefits to your brain through all the 3 reasons that we talked about. You're bringing, causing new, blood vessels to grow in the brain, bringing oxygen and nutrients, right? You're getting your brain cells to grow and be denser, and all the great stuff. On top of that, I want to talk now more specifically, right, kind of brain recommendations that we want to talk about. Yes, so if we have the children, like the child that we saw earlier, children who may be moving excessively because they do have weakness in sensory processing, can we help the body sense better? Yes, just like we can help the eyes, be sharper in understanding a B is a B, a D is a D, kind of correcting some of these reversal challenges, right? Or sharpening auditory processing. There are tools to that. Likewise, we can sharpen our sensory motor processing, right? So the idea is really a fitness kind of idea. You're not stuck with it. You are not so fit in some of that processing. You can get the brain to become fitter, sharper, faster, more accurate. Yeah. And we can do that to the sensory systems. So if you want to improve proprioception, one of the ways is to do sustained muscular exertion. Now, if you are working with preschoolers, or if you have preschool children, now that is certainly always the best time, because in the first 6 years, we have tremendous brain plasticity. So we really want to wire every single great thing, as much as we can. So we want to think of the brain, holistically, not just movement, but everything else, but certainly not neglecting movement. Yeah. So we're doing these exercises with them as well, right? Because they are developing, the sensory processing, the accuracy, is developing for all these sensory systems. Now, if you want to stimulate the vestibular system, you need to think of movement, right? So just like, just like sustained muscular effort, that means you're holding that posture, the child, kind of holding that posture for a while. So that means sustain, not just kind of like a punch and let go, all right? Or pull and let go. But you want to pull and pull and pull, that sustained muscle effort, right? So that's when it starts to fire all these muscles, right? So it gives you that sense of where your body is. Now, likewise, when you're trying to improve that inner ears, that sensing of where you are, to give you that postural tone, that spatial awareness, then you need to add movement into your activities, right? Your exercises. For example, the trampoline, right? You add an up and down movement, right? So this would be some of the exercises, that we use at BrainFit, and some of them we send them home to parents, to do it, with or without a trampoline, right? So this is kind of like an up and downward motion. So you can think about rotation, you can think about your merry-go-rounds, all right, your seesaw in the playground, So you want to have a good dose of movement sensation that the brain is processing. We like the trampoline a lot because when you're landing, you're also building that rhythm, and that proprioception is coming through the body as well when you land. Yeah, so it's a nice kind of little tool. Now, for core stability, and again, if you have kind of weak sensory system, you always want to think of your core. Remember, the moment core means you have kind of your trunk muscles, all right? Your muscles around your spine that keeps you up. Because if that is strong, it releases attention bandwidth, all right? Because then you find it a lot more effortless to do some of these, this postural, upright kind of activities that supports learning. Yeah, so you want to build primarily trunk muscles, right? Like your crunches, yeah, your back extension exercises, your shoulder muscles as well. So these will be some of the exercises that we do. It's a crawling activity, right? But we do some planning involved in there as well. Yeah, so you see the timing and all that is because, we work a lot on timing and precision as well, right? Because these are the other elements. I'll talk about them in a minute, right? So you can do exercises like that for the younger kids. For, elementary kids, you can do that. For the older kids, you can ask them to hold static postures. It's probably harder for younger children to hold, kind of like your bridging kind of exercises for your trunk, kind of more adult, your gym classes. So for the younger kids, you can do that. But as you go into the older kids, you can think of, how the adult would strengthen the trunk, yeah, with some of these like crunches that I've mentioned. And so the core stability is helpful. And you also want to think about putting in complexity, because then you have to start the planning. Remember, we talk about sequencing and planning. So the more the child has to pay attention, and when you're also adding timing, right, and different sequences where they have to learn, there's motor learning involved, then you are building the entire sequencing and planning kind of system, right, that has a broader impact. So even though these circuits are created through movement, they can be recruited by other areas used for thinking and learning. So I'll give you an example here where we have some movement exercises where the precision and timing becomes the key. If we are driving planning, it becomes very important that we want all the transitions to be done, in a sharp way, because that's when the attention and the rhythm and the sequencing comes in. Yeah. So movement patterns like this. And of course, we put it into a routine. Yeah, I won't go through that. Yeah, so you can see the transitions, all right? It is when you need to be precise at those transitions are things that we will want to emphasize, to stress that planning, that sequencing and planning in the brain. Okay, better speed up. So here you can see, I just want to talk about, so this is a format that BrainFit has been using, to train brains, right? So if you have been in our earlier webinars, you might have heard that. So we use the 5 + 3 = 8 formula. So we work on the 5 brain system. So movement is one of them. And tonight, of course, we have spent a lot of time talking about this system, but we also have the visual, auditory, your focus and your emotional systems. We call them the 5 core brain pillars. Now, how do we build up the entire brain? Look, physical exercise is a main part for us, right? Of course, we have mental exercises and emotional coaching as well. Now, the =8, 8 is all the whole brain benefits that we look out for. We want the child to be faster, to have better memory, attention span, reasoning, timing and coordination, and all the EQ skills, right? And so you can see that, our emphasis on movement is quite significant. So we actually have an app, that we build, right? Smart Moves, that has almost, more than about 20 games with more than 600 levels that we are deliberately, kind of driving your sensory motor processing. So these are just all the different games, right? Building your core stability, your balance, all right? Going up into your motor planning. So these will be different levels of difficulty or different systems that you're trying to target. Yeah. And finally, of course, you have your timing and all that. And certainly we are able to see results, right? And here you can see children improving in their speed of handwriting after training. And this is without any kind of like drills, handwriting drills on worksheets. Yeah. So this is just through really physical exercises. Of course, with mental exercises. So we are whole brain center. So we do a combination of physical, mental exercises and emotional coaching. Or here, a child, the same child, who might not have a speed issue, but you can see the control. Yeah. So this child tells us, either I'm fast or I'm neat. I cannot be fast and neat. It's a bandwidth issue. If you want me to be fast, I cannot control. Yeah. So we want the child to be more efficient. So we want you to be fast and have the control. So that's when, you are able to build that. Okay. So the senses and the system, they are able to impact that. I've come to the end and so I'll take some questions. All right. So hopefully that it has helped you, given you some understanding of this very, very interesting system that has, brought me to do brain training as a physical therapist. So do give us some feedback if you've enjoyed this, if it has been helpful, tell us what you like or not like. We always try and cater to our audience preferences as much as we can. And if you're interested to find out more about our programs, right, we have trial classes, we have informational sessions. Please sign up on that form, right? Our classes are being held online as well. I don't actually have a slide, but I did have a video that showed you, kids doing physical exercises at home, in this stay home period. So it can be done. In Singapore, we're having school vacation, so you might want to consider that and keep the children active. In 2 weeks' time, our next webinar would be on learning style. All right, it's an important discussion. I have a learning style, fact or myth. I want to discuss, it's quite controversial. If you are following this topic, you will know that it's got its fair share of controversies and discussions and debates. If you are new to that, you will want to join us for an interesting discussion around that as well. At this point, maybe I will just ask Shirley if I have any questions. For me, Shirley, I'm sorry.
Yes, Cheryl, yes, actually we have quite a couple of interesting questions. So I'm just going to go in order of a few that came up first. So one, you were talking at the start about, all the different systems that we have, the vestibular system. And this question is related to that. The question is about whether someone with poor vestibular system, can it be corrected? Or is there like a window of opportunity, a time block that is better for it to get like fixed or improved?
Okay. The brain is plastic through life, right? And we know that even adults with perhaps balance issues, can have vestibular exercises to correct them. Yeah, sometimes it might take some time. All right, I mean, the brain is a lot more plastic in the younger years. This is what we know. So, like I said, if we want all these systems to be intact, the best is to give them, before the age of 6. So beyond that, certainly children's brain plasticity is still better than adults, all right? But we know for a fact, from adult rehabilitation that vestibular weaknesses can be improved through targeted exercises, all right? May not always be the most rapid that we want, and depending on the age of the student, but certainly elementary students, through the student's life, we know that the adults can be improved. That's why my comment would be, yes, it can be helped. Yeah, but certainly we prefer a lot more if these kind of remediations happening or this kind of development is happening naturally in the first 6 years. So hope that helps, Shirley.
Yes, I think yes, it does. Okay, so the next one, right? We have gotten this question before at our center in Singapore. So this question is about how, some children, they struggle with reading, writing, and maintaining attention. However, in terms of activities like sports and ballet, these children can excel. How come is it that, their coordination skills are fine and suddenly they are really focused when it's this kind of activity, but then when it's, academic things like reading and writing, then it doesn't translate?
No, that's a great question, because the question that often comes up, when I do a talk on movement and talk about how important it is, people will raise to me that, look, a lot of great athletes, they are not academic, right? Because if movement is so intimately linked, to academics, wouldn't all the sports stars also be Harvard grads, And that's not the case. That's a very good and valid question. Now, Remember, in our last webinar, I talked about the task analysis model, right? So that's a way, a method that we use when we try and solve problems using a brain-based approach. So you need to look at writing, reading itself as tasks, right? So where it connects with movement is the eye tracking for reading and when writing, right? And for writing, additionally, the finger skills. That's how it links to those academic skills. Now, what is not linked are many areas that we did not discuss. For example, to be a solid reader, and we've spent a few webinars talking about reading, you need to have a solid auditory processing skills, because at the heart of reading is language processing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think, reading is just going through the words visually, right? But it's not. Language is just sounds in your head, or you're making sounds, but in a certain way we call it, it forms a meaningful language. Yeah, words that has meaning. But at the biological level, it's units of sounds that creates language. So reading on its core is an auditory processing task. Writing as well, if you're talking about composing writing, right? But of course, copying, coloring is your hand skills, but also the visual processing. So now your writing is not motor alone. You need to follow the visuals, whatever that you're trying to copy, right? Be it a word, BED. You need to be able to visualize that, then space it, the bed. You got to have that spacing. That is a visual task as well. Of course, spatial, the body is very strongly linked to visual. All right. So through spatial, there is some connection, but visual itself has got a whole bunch of skills that are involved in the actual task of writing. Okay, so the brain is very complex. So when we talk about the connection, it doesn't mean exclusively motor. There are many other areas that are also needed depending on the task. So which is why some of these top athletes may not be excel in academic learning, right? If the auditory processing wasn't strong, then reading would have been a challenge. So they might be a great sportsman. Then you find that, other academic areas may not be, equally effortless or easy for them. But it's a great question. Thanks for raising that. I think it really clarifies how complex the brain is. And the way to really answer some of these questions is to look at a task and look at what are the brain skills that you actually need. And then look at the child. Do you have these brain skills? Yeah. And then build them up, based on, which activity that the child might be struggling with. Another question, Shirley?
Yes, I think that's a great way of looking at it, because we do often get questions about how, I think it is not the brain, it's just the body, or the other way around, but actually they are always interconnected. Yeah, so maybe we take one last question, because we are at 9:30 here at Singapore. So this question is interesting as well, because these days, mindfulness has become really popular, and the topic surrounding mindfulness, a lot of schools, even ours, have started doing mindfulness. So the question is about how is there any conflict between taking little 10-minute breaks of mindfulness exercise or just 10 minutes of physical exercise? Like which one do you go for? Is there a difference? Is there a conflict? Mindfulness and exercise.
Another great question, but it's a hard one because you're not comparing apples with apples. you are developing two different systems altogether, right? So with physical exercises, you are working on that sensory motor brain. Very important for all the reasons that we have discussed, right? Sharpening the senses, prepping the body, efficiency, and all that. When you do mindfulness training, you're actually training the front part of the brain, your executive function, where you need that to pay attention and have good working memory, right? And deep thinking. So it's actually another part of the brain altogether, equally, very important as well, all right? So no, I will not say that one is better than the other. It would be ideal that the children have lots of breaks, both mindfulness and brain breaks, because they serve different functions. But these are all great mental activities that we strongly encourage educators and parents, to have our children do them. And if you need a whole set of kind of exercises, structured exercises, also mindfulness, emotional exercises, and also physical exercises, get in touch with us. If you work in a school, we actually work with schools, to develop, to get these apps accessible to teachers, so that you can just play these exercises that we have designed for your kids, in 5-10 minutes, etc. I think that's probably all we have time for.
Yes, I think so. And our panelists are all hard at work. I think almost all the questions are being answered. But again, even if any questions are not answered, or if any audience has more questions for Miss Cheryl or the rest of us, you can drop it in the feedback form. Right, Cheryl?
Yes. Please use our feedback form. You can see still the code, and are we having the link available as well?
Yes.
To everybody. So do give us feedback, or if you're interested to find out more. So do give us that feedback. Thank you very much. Otherwise, sorry, we're a bit late. We try to be on time. But thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. We are going to leave the webinar on for a while so that everyone can access the feedback form, and then, leave your comments or questions in the form. Please note that, so long as you get to the link, you are able to continue filling it up even as we close the webinar. So we're just going to leave it on for another minute or two so that we can all get to the form.
Yeah, I'll just add, if Lynn, if you're still here, what type of exercise do you suggest in 10-minute break? Do 100 jumping jacks. All right. Yeah, something like that. Get them moving, elevate the heart rate a little bit. And of course, if you have, trampolines and you have a brain fit climb, you have a whole set of exercises to go to. But if nothing, jumping jacks, that would be good. Quick answer.
Yeah, we have a comment about, can we just get the child to shake? Can we just do a shaking exercise? I guess that
play a
works
YouTube video, do a dance, just have them moving, and you want some aerobic, kind of like, so a bit of sustained activity for a little bit. That would be good. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We're just going to leave this on for just another 30 seconds. Make sure you can all get to the feedback form before we close the webinar. All right, we are going to close the webinar now. Thank you, everyone. Sorry if you didn't get to your question. Please put it at the feedback form, and then we will get back to you. Thank you so much. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
See you
Thank
next time.
you. Thank you.